I waited for him to say something. Anything. My father just kept cutting his steak, like he hadn't heard what my younger sister said, like the words hadn't been thrown across the table at me with that particular smile of hers, the one that always meant she'd been saving up the line for days. Some people just aren't built for ownership, she said again, slower this time in case I'd missed it. It's not a flaw, it's just genetics or something. My mother laughed, a small, tinkling laugh, the kind she'd been making since I was 9 years old, and brought home a math test with a perfect score. And she said, "Well, somebody has to be the smart one, I guess. Not proud. Not warm. Just a noting of facts. The way you might note that the dishwasher needed unloading." I set my fork down. I picked up my water glass. I took a long, careful sip. "You're probably right," I said. My sister's eyes flickered. She wasn't expecting that. She had a whole speech prepared, I could tell, about how renting was actually fine for some people, how not everyone needed the stability of a home, how I shouldn't feel bad about my situation. She'd practiced it in her car. She did that. I knew because once, years ago, I'd walked out to the driveway and heard her rehearsing a story about herself for our cousin's wedding, but I'd taken the wind out of her by agreeing. So she just sat there for a second, blinking, before pivoting to something about her remodel, the new quartz countertop she was getting installed next week. How the contractor said her home was actually a really excellent investment property, the kind that appreciates. Excellent investment property. I almost laughed. I almost spit my water across the table, but I just nodded, said that's wonderful, and asked my father if he wanted me to pass the salt. My name is Whitley. I'm 31 years old. And what no one at that table knew, what no one in my family had ever bothered to figure out, was that I was the one paying for those quartz countertops. I was the one who'd paid for the hardwood refinishing 8 months ago. I was the one who'd paid for the new HVAC system that my sister bragged about to anyone who'd listen. Because the house my sister lived in, the house she swept her arms around and called mine, the house she invited the family to every Sunday for dinner so she could perform her domesticity like a one-woman play, that house had a mortgage, and for the past 2 years and 4 months, every cent of that mortgage had come out of my checking account, $3,470 a month. Like clockwork, autopay, set up the morning my sister called me crying about how she was going to lose the house, how the bank had made a mistake, how she just needed help for a few months until she got back on her feet. That was 28 months ago. Let me back up. I grew up in a small ranch house in a suburb of Cincinnati, the kind of neighborhood where everyone knew everyone and nothing ever happened. My parents had 2 daughters. I came first by 4 years. My sister came second, and according to family legend, she came out smiling. She was always so charming, even as a baby, my mother used to say, while I sat on the kitchen floor, putting cereal in a Tupperware container. Because I'd learned by then that if I waited for her to feed me, breakfast might not happen. I was the responsible one. That was my designation, decided at some point in early childhood and never up for revision. Responsible, sensible, steady, the one who could be left alone, the one who didn't need much, the one who would, if pressed, articulate her needs in a calm, organized way that could then be calmly, organizationally denied. My sister was the bright one, the talented one, the one who needed encouragement, who needed nurturing, who needed every dance class and every summer camp and every prom dress that cost more than my first car. She's sensitive, my mother would say. You don't understand her like I do. I understood her fine. I just learned, somewhere around the age of 7, that there wasn't going to be enough to go around, and that if I wanted any kind of life, I was going to have to build it myself, quietly, in the corners they didn't pay attention to. So I did. I worked 3 jobs in high school. I went to a state school on a scholarship that nobody in my family came to celebrate. I graduated early, took a job at a regional bank in their commercial lending division, and started studying for my real estate license at night. By the time I was 25, I'd saved enough for the down payment on a duplex in a transitioning neighborhood. I rented out the top unit and lived in the bottom. By the time I was 27, I'd bought a second property, then a third. By 29, I'd quit the bank. I never told them. None of them. They thought I worked some boring office job. They thought I rented a tiny apartment somewhere, which I sort of did because I'd kept living in the bottom unit of that first duplex, even after I could have afforded much more. It was simpler that way, cheaper, and, more importantly, it kept the picture in their heads clean. The picture where I was struggling. The picture where my sister was thriving. I let them have the picture. It was easier than the conversation we would otherwise have had to have. My sister, meanwhile, was 28 when she got married to a man named Trent, who sold pharmaceutical equipment and was gone 4 days a week. They bought a house in a development on the nicer side of town. It was beige, and it had a 2-car garage, and my sister posted about it on Facebook every other day for the first 6 months. Our forever home. Living the dream. Blessed. I'd seen the listing when it sold. I knew what they paid. I also knew, because I'd done their math in my head one evening at Christmas dinner while my sister talked about their Caribbean cruise, that there was no way Trent's salary and her vague job in marketing were covering that mortgage plus the lifestyle she was performing. I wasn't surprised when she called me. It was a Tuesday in March, about 2.5 years ago. I was in my office, working on the closing paperwork for a 4-unit building I'd just bought up in Norwood. My sister was crying so hard I could barely understand her. Trent left, she said. He left, he just left, and the mortgage is due, and Mom and Dad don't have the money, and I don't know what to do. Please, I'll lose the house. I can't lose the house. I asked what happened. She gave me a version of the story that I would, later, learn was almost entirely fictional. The real version was that Trent hadn't left exactly. He'd asked for a separation after discovering some financial irregularities and an affair with his coworker. He'd moved into an extended stay, but she'd told my parents he'd abandoned her, and she told me the same thing, and the truth didn't come out for another 16 months. That first call, though, she sounded broken, and whatever else I felt about my sister, she was still my sister. I'd watched her get away with everything our whole lives. But I'd also held her hand when she got stitches at 6 years old. And I'd helped her with her algebra homework in high school when she cried about not understanding it. And there was a part of me, the part I would later have to surgically remove, that still believed somewhere underneath all of it she was someone who would have, if the situation were reversed, helped me. So I helped her. I said I'd cover the mortgage. Just for a few months. Just until she got things sorted out. She thanked me through her tears. She said she'd pay me back every cent. She said I was the best sister in the world. The first month, she sent me a card, handwritten. Thank you for being my rock. The second month, she sent me a text. Got your payment. You're a lifesaver. The third month, nothing. The fourth month, when I asked her gently how things were going, she sounded confused. Oh, the mortgage. I assumed we worked that out. Mom said you were happy to help. Mom said. That was the moment I should have stopped. That was the off-ramp. I saw it, that drove right past it, because what I did instead was tell myself a story about how she was overwhelmed, a story about how she was probably embarrassed, a story about how if I made a big deal out of it, she'd freeze up and the whole thing would explode and our parents would be devastated and I would be the bad guy and I had so much, I really did, the payments weren't actually hurting me. What was the point of having money if you couldn't help your family? So I kept paying for 2 years and 4 months. In that time, my sister redid her kitchen. She bought a new car, an Audi, white. She went to Aruba twice and to Spain once. She got Botox, which she announced at Easter as if it were a moral accomplishment. She started a small online business selling overpriced candles that, by her own admission, did not actually sell. But she enjoyed making the Instagram content for it. She told everyone she was an entrepreneur. She did not, in any month, send me a single dollar. She also, somewhere along the way, started talking about me a certain way. I'm not sure when it started. Maybe it had always been there and I'd just gotten better at noticing. She would say things like, well, not everyone is cut out for the homeowner life. Or, I'm so lucky Trent and I figured out how to make it work financially. Or, the one that really got under my skin? You've got to admire her, though. She's so independent, she doesn't need anybody. She'd say it with this look. This particular pitying look. like I was the family stray she'd given a name to. And my parents would nod. My father, who had once told me at 15 that I shouldn't expect anyone to pay for college because I was, and I quote, the kind of girl who lands on her feet. My mother, who at my college graduation took a photo of just my sister and the cake and forgot to include me. They would nod and smile and reassure my sister that yes, some people just weren't built for stability, but she was doing such a wonderful job in her beautiful home. The dinner I started with, that Sunday dinner, that was a Sunday in October. She'd been on a roll all evening. She'd been complaining about her contractor. She'd been complaining about how Trent, who had by then quietly moved back in once she'd convinced him the affair was a one-time thing, didn't appreciate everything she did for the household. She'd been complaining about a coworker she didn't like, and then, somewhere between the salad and the main course, she'd looked over at me, eating quietly, and decided I needed to be put in my place. Whitley's still in that apartment, right? The little one by the highway? Yes. How many years has it been now? A few. You should think about getting your own place at some point. Equity. It's the only way to build wealth. She turned to her mother. I keep telling her. It's just hard for some people, our mother said. Whitley's careful with her money. Careful. My sister chuckled. There's careful, and there's just renting forever. Some people just aren't built for ownership. Mom laughed. Dad cut his steak. And I sat there with 30-some properties to my name, with a net worth my sister couldn't have guessed in 6 tries, with the knowledge that the very chair she was sitting in had been paid for, in a sense, by me, and I felt something inside me go quiet, not angry, quiet, like a room that someone had finally closed the door on. You're probably right, I said. That was the moment. I drove home that night the long way. I took the back roads, the ones that wind through the old neighborhoods where the trees touch over the street, and I let myself think. Not in spirals the way I usually did about my family. Not in defenses and rebuttals, and what she meant was just clean, methodical thinking. The way I thought about properties. I thought about the contract. There wasn't one. That was the first thing. In 2 years and 4 months of paying her mortgage, I had never once put anything in writing, not a loan agreement, not a repayment schedule, not even a text confirming the arrangement. Every transfer had gone through my bank account directly to the mortgage servicer, on auto pay, set up under my name with her loan number. But that was actually, I realized as I drove, a kind of opportunity, because the servicer's records would show my payments. My bank statements would show the transfers. There was, in fact, a perfect paper trail, just not the kind she or my parents would think to look for. The next morning, a Monday, I called my lawyer. His name is Henrik. He's been my real estate attorney since I bought the first duplex. And he is, for reasons I have never fully understood, one of the kindest men I have ever met. Despite spending his entire professional life dealing with people at their worst. I have a strange one, I said. He laughed. You always do, I told him, the whole thing, start to finish. The original phone call, the auto pay, the years, the family dynamic, the dinner the night before. I tried to be brisk and professional about it, but somewhere around minute 6 my voice cracked, and Henrik in his kind, even way said, Take your time, Whitley, and I had to put down the phone for a minute. When I picked it back up, he was ready. So here's the thing, he said. You've been making payments on a mortgage that is not in your name, on a property you don't own, with no written agreement. Most people in this situation, the money is just gone. But we have a few options. He walked me through them. The first was the simplest. Stop paying. Just turn off the auto pay. The mortgage would go delinquent within 30 days. The bank would send notices. My sister would have to figure out what to do. I would lose the money I'd already paid, but the bleeding would stop. The second option was more involved. We could file what's called an equitable lien against the property, on the grounds that I'd contributed substantially to the maintenance of the asset under the reasonable expectation of either repayment or eventual ownership interest. It wouldn't necessarily win in court, Henrik said, but it would create a cloud on the title. She couldn't sell. She couldn't refinance. She couldn't do anything with the house without dealing with me. The third option was the one that made me actually sit down in my office chair. You said the mortgage is held by First Cincinnati Federal? Yes. I happen to know, Henrik said carefully, that they sell off pools of mortgages periodically, including some smaller residential ones. It's not common for an individual to buy a specific mortgage, but it's not impossible, especially if you have, let's say, an established relationship with their commercial division. I did. Of course I did. I'd been borrowing from First Cincinnati Federal for 7 years. You're telling me, I said slowly, I could buy her mortgage. I'm telling you, Henrik said, that I could make some calls. I sat there for a long minute, looking out the window of my office at the parking lot. Make the calls, I said. It took 6 weeks. In those 6 weeks, I did several other things. I kept paying the mortgage on schedule because I didn't want anything to look unusual until everything was in place. I went to one more family dinner, a Sunday in early November, and I sat there while my sister talked about her plans for a new master bathroom. And I smiled and asked thoughtful questions and watched my mother refill my sister's wine glass twice before remembering I was there. I also went through my own records, carefully. I printed out every bank statement showing every transfer. I made a folder. I labeled it. I made copies of the copies. And on a cold Thursday morning in late November, 2 days before Thanksgiving, I closed on the purchase of my sister's mortgage. The total outstanding balance was just under $280,000. I bought it at a small discount from face value because the bank was happy to clear it off their books. I now held the note. I was, in every legal sense, her lender. I did not tell her. I did not tell anyone. Thanksgiving was at my parents' house. My sister arrived in her Audi with Trent, who at this point in their reconciliation was performing the role of devoted husband with about as much enthusiasm as a high school understudy. My sister had a new haircut. She had a new bag. She greeted me with the particular cheek air kiss she'd been using on me since college and said, "Oh, sweetie, you look tired. Are you sleeping enough?" "I'm sleeping great," I said. Dinner was dinner. My sister talked about the bathroom. My mother nodded along. My father carved the turkey. At one point, my sister asked me, with that fake bright tone, whether I'd been on any dates lately, and I said no. And she said, "Don't worry, sweetie. Your time will come. You've just got to put yourself out there." I excused myself before dessert. I drove home. I sat in my apartment, the same bottom unit of the same duplex I'd bought when I was 25, and I poured myself a glass of wine, and I called Henrik. "Send the letter," I said. The letter went out the following Monday. It was, Henrik assured me, a perfectly standard letter, a notification to the borrower that her mortgage had been transferred to a new servicer. The new servicer was an LLC I had set up specifically for this purpose, named something deliberately bland and forgettable. The letter informed her of the new payment address, the new account number, the new contact information. It was, in its content, identical to any letter any mortgage holder might receive when their loan got sold. The only difference was that, at the bottom, in small print, the LLC was listed as being owned by one Whitley M. with my full last name. And I turned off the autopay. She called me Wednesday afternoon. I let it go to voicemail. I let the second call go to voicemail. I picked up the third one. "What is this letter?" Her voice was sharp. Sharper than I'd heard it in years. "What is this letter, Whitley?" "What letter?" I said. "There's a letter from some company saying they own my mortgage, with your name on it." "Oh," I let the words sit there. "Yes." She was quiet for a long second. I could hear her breathing. I could hear in the background a child's voice, probably the neighbor's kid in the yard, and the hum of her dryer running, and the small, ordinary sounds of a life that, until very recently, I had been entirely funding. "Whitley, what did you do?" "I bought your mortgage." You don't have that kind of money." "I do." "How?" "How do you?" "How?" "I've been investing in real estate for almost 10 years, I said. I own 34 properties, including now the note on yours." The silence on the other end was so long I almost asked if she was still there. When she spoke, her voice had changed. It had gone small and shaky, in a way I'd heard her use before, the way she used it to get her way. "Whitley, sweetie, there's been a misunderstanding. I think we need to talk in person. Let me come over. Let me explain." "There's nothing to explain. You stopped paying your mortgage 28 months ago. I picked up the payments. Now I own the loan. The auto pay is off. Your December payment is due on the 15th. You're shaking me down. You're shaking me down for money I don't have. I'm telling you, I said very slowly, that you have a mortgage payment due, like any homeowner does, to the lender, which happens to be me. She started crying, or making the sounds of crying. I knew the difference by then. Mom and Dad are going to hear about this, she said, switching tactics. They're going to be horrified. You're attacking your own sister. Over money. You have so much, apparently, and you're going to take it out on me? I'm not taking anything out on you. You're going to take my house. I might, she gasped. Actually gasped. I'd never heard a real one outside of a movie. I'm hanging up, she said. I'm calling Mom. You do that? I said. My phone rang again 20 minutes later. It was my mother. Whitley. Her voice was already at the pitch she reserved for genuine emergencies, of which, in our family, there had previously been only one, when my sister had been pulled over for a DUI in college, and we needed to get her out of the holding cell. Your sister just called me hysterical. What in God's name is going on? I told her cleanly. No dramatics. The original loan, the auto pay, the 2 years and 4 months of payments. The total amount I had paid, $76,440, plus tax implications I was still working through. The dinner in October, the decision to buy the mortgage, the letter, the call. My mother was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, she said something I had not expected. Why didn't you tell us? Which part? All of it, the money, the properties. Why have we been thinking you were struggling? I thought about that for a long time. I thought about how to answer it honestly. I thought about whether there was even a point. Mom, I said, the entire time I was growing up, you told me I was the responsible one, the one who didn't need help, the one who landed on her feet. I built a whole life around that being true, because the alternative was to be the one of you didn't believe in. And then I built so much of a life that I couldn't tell you, because if I did, you would have started treating me the way you've always treated her. And I didn't want that. I wanted something that was just mine. My mother started to say something, then stopped, then started again. Your father wants to talk to you, she said. She put him on the phone. My father who had cut his steak through that dinner in October, who had let his older daughter sit there and be insulted at his table. My father said, I owe you an apology. I sat down. I had to. I owe you a lot of apologies, he said. I think we both do, your mother and I. But I owe you one specifically, and I want to say it now before I lose my nerve. I should have said something at that dinner. I should have said something at a lot of dinners, and I didn't. Because it was easier. Because your sister has always been louder, and you have always been steadier. And somewhere along the way, I started taking advantage of how steady you are. I am very, very sorry. I did not cry. I want to be clear about that. Because I had spent my entire life not crying in front of my father, and I was not going to start now. But there was a long minute where I could not speak. Thank you, I finally said. What do you want to do about your sister? I want her to make her mortgage payment, I said. On time, every month, to me, the same way she would to any bank. If she does that, she keeps the house. If she doesn't, I'll foreclose. There's no negotiation. There's no family discount. It is the same arrangement she had with First Cincinnati Federal, except now it's with me. Okay, he said. And the $76,000, I said, I want back, with interest. I'll have Henrik send a payment plan. Okay, he said again. I'll see if I can help her with that. I'll see if your mother and I can. I don't know what we can do, but we'll figure something out. That's between you and her, I said. I just want it back. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, I didn't know about any of this, Whitley. I want you to know that. About the Trent thing, and her lying about it, and I didn't know. I'm not making excuses. But I didn't know. I know you didn't. We hung up. My sister did not call me again that night. She did not call me the next day either. What she did do was post a long, vaguely worded statement on Facebook about how some people forget what family means, and how she was going through the hardest time of her life, and how she would appreciate prayers and positivity. 42 of our extended family members liked it. 3 of them messaged me to ask if I was okay. She did make the December payment. Late, but she made it. I assume my father gave her the money. I did not ask. In January, I had a contractor I trusted go look at the house. Not to evaluate her renovations, which were apparently quite nice, but to verify the structural condition of the property in case I had to take it back. Everything looked good. I had him send me the invoice. I did not send it to her. In February, Trent moved out for real. My sister called my mother sobbing. My mother called me, not asking for anything, just to tell me. I said I was sorry to hear it. I meant it a little. In March, my sister called me. The first call since the original one. Her voice was different, smaller, without the performance. I owe you money, she said. Yes, I don't have it. I know. I want to sell the house. I want to pay you back. I want to start over somewhere smaller. Can you help me figure out how to do that? I thought about it. I told her I would on 3 conditions. First, that we listed at a price I thought it would actually sell for, not the inflated number she wanted. Second, that any equity above what she owed me went straight to me until the $76,000 was paid off with interest. And third, that whatever happened next in our relationship would happen at the pace I set, not the pace she did. She agreed to all of it. The house sold in May for almost exactly what I'd predicted. After closing costs and the payoff of the remaining mortgage and the $76,000 plus interest, my sister walked away with about $18,000. She moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in the same complex I'd lived in years ago, before I bought the duplex, the same one she'd made fun of at that dinner. My father came to my office one afternoon in June. He'd never been there before. He brought a coffee, the way he might have if I were a colleague, and he sat in the chair across from my desk and looked around at the framed photos of properties and the certifications on the wall. And he said, I had no idea. I know. I'm proud of you, Whitley. I should have been telling you that for 30 years. I told him I appreciated it. Then I told him about a small house I'd seen up in Pleasant Ridge, a 2-bedroom that needed some work but had good bones. I told him I was thinking of buying it. I told him I thought it might be a nice rental eventually, or a starter place for the right person at the right time. I did not say that I'd already been thinking about which one of my parents might need a smaller place to live in someday. I did not say that I'd already started a separate account, just in case. I just told him about the house, and he listened. And then he asked me a question about the cap rate, which he had clearly looked up on the way over, and I laughed, and I explained it to him, and we talked about real estate for an hour, like 2 people who had only just met but were getting along. That was a year ago. My sister and I see each other now, occasionally. She works at a salon. She is, against everyone's expectations, including mine, quite good at it. She is also, for the first time in her adult life, paying her own rent. Last Christmas, she gave me a card that said, "Thank you for not letting me get away with it." I put it in a drawer. I think about it more than I want to admit. I still live in the bottom unit of the duplex. I think I always will. It is a small life by some measures, and it is a very large one by others. What I want to say, if anyone is listening, is this. You can love someone and still draw the line. You can be the responsible one and still ask to be carried every once in a while. You can give and give and give, and one day you can stop, and the world will not end. The people who only love the version of you that gave, they will reveal themselves quickly. And the ones who stay, the ones who sit across from you with a cup of coffee and say, "I had no idea," and mean it. Those are the ones who get to come with you into the next part of your life. The mortgage payment hits my account on the 1st of every month. From a tenant, now. A real one. Not family. I sleep better than I have in years. I think about that Sunday dinner more than I should. Not because I'm still angry about it, but because it was the moment I finally understood something I'd been refusing to see my whole life. My sister didn't humiliate me at that table because she was cruel. She did it because I had taught her, over 31 years, that there was no consequence for doing so. Every time she'd taken a swing at me and I'd absorbed it, every time she'd asked for something and I'd quietly provided it, every time my father cut a steak and my mother laughed her little laugh, I was the one writing the rules. I just hadn't realized I was holding the pen. That's the part I want to leave you with. Causes have effects. We say it like it's obvious, but most of us go through our whole lives acting as if kindness given to the wrong person will somehow, magically, turn that person into someone worthy of it. It doesn't work that way. People become what we allow them to be. My sister became a person who could call my apartment the little one by the highway because I had spent 28 months proving I would still wire her 3,470 taras on the first of every month, no matter what came out of her mouth. The mortgage payment was the lesson. She just learned it. What broke the cycle wasn't anger. I want to be specific about that because I think anger gets too much credit in stories like this one. Anger would have made me yell at her at that dinner. Anger would have made me call our mother that night and demand an apology. Anger would have felt good for about 6 hours and then left me exactly where I started. What actually broke the cycle was something quieter. It was the discipline of going home, driving the long way, and thinking instead of reacting. It was calling Henrik on a Monday morning and asking what my legal options were. It was being willing to wait 6 weeks while a plan came together, smiling through one more dinner, paying one more mortgage installment, because the satisfying move and the right move are almost never the same move. That, to me, is what intelligence really is. Not being clever, not having the perfect comeback, just the willingness to sit with a hard truth long enough to figure out what you're actually going to do about it. And nerve. You need nerve, too. You need to be able to look at the person who shaped your whole childhood, the one who taught you to be small, and tell them no. Not screaming, just no. The hardest sentence I have ever spoken in my life was 3 words long, and I said it across a dinner table while a piece of asparagus got cold on my plate. You're probably right. It was a no disguised as a yes, and it cost me nothing in the moment, and it changed everything afterward. If anyone watching this is the responsible one in their family, the one who pays and stays quiet, hear me. Your steadiness is not a debt you owe them. It is a resource you built. Spend it on the people who would spend theirs on you. And when the people you grew up with finally see who you actually are, the way my father did across a coffee in my office, you'll know which ones are coming with you into the rest of your life. The rest you can love from a distance. With the auto pay turned off,